A rhythmic beeping rang, its sound carried to a brain still asleep, one that now stirred at the intrusion on its rest. That same brain now started a slow process of awakening its owner, activating different parts of the body it resided in. First was its hearing, as that was what had disturbed it. The sounds were those it recognized, some different life support machines. It started to reason why they were what it heard. It remembered their owner was attacked. Were the injuries more fatal than it realized? No, it had shut down to slow something else, but that information was still locked away. It didn't matter now. If it was hearing life support, it meant the danger had likely passed. Its owner must have been saved before he became unconscious, leaving it to keep him alive. Next would be touch, the need to fully know its current state calling. As the several trillions of nerves fed it data, it learned more. Their owner was in a bed and was covered by a blanket, but there was a weight on his legs, and a soft, furred form was on its right hand. The steady pressing it gave meant it was drawing breath, and it felt the slumbering mind stir with comfort. Its owner's mouth and nose were partly blocked, but that didn't stop the flow of air. There was also a bit of tightness on the body below the pectorals. Yes, the stab wound was bandaged. It felt a light chill in the air about him. It needed more information, perhaps the taste and scent receptors next. It learned and remembered what plastic was like, and its tongue worked around a bit. And the faint hit of a scent bled through whatever was blocking his nose. It was like applewood, but enriched by mountain flowers. With its recognition, the slumbering mind stirred again. It also noted the scent of disinfectant, cementing its acceptance of its current position. The brain was sure that its owner would be able to handle it from here. It started its muscles and motor functions, and then awoke him at the opening of his eyes, its task done as it stepped to the background again. David's eyes shifted a bit as they opened for the first time in what felt like days to him, his vision blurred by the instant exposure to light, instinctively making him move his hands to shield them. But from within the blur, a mass shifted a grayed entity, the telling separation of a face marked by amber points turning to him. "David!" came a confused voice, someone still indistinguishable from his sight, yet familiar to his ears. A loving tone singing into his core. As he went to speak back, he found his mouth still blocked and simply reached for them instead, finding a soft-furred hand greeting him back. "Thank no says no. You are alive," they said before realizing his current inability to speak. "1 second, I'll get a medical officer." Leaving him with fast and receding steps, his eyes started to settle and he saw his room. He was in one of the patient rooms for those who needed supervision. His bed, though, appeared clean, had the telltale signs of Alaris having rested on them. It was flanked by bedside stands and chairs for guests. His right arm had an IV line it, and he could see the slight loss of his muscle mass, a signal that not everything was fine, but his answers lay with his caregiver. He could hear the approaching footfalls, and as the door slid open, he could see her with clear vision. Alaris was standing there. Her face showed signs of loving concern, yet her tale informed him she was indeed truly happy. Just behind her was a Vyshtani he didn't recognize, however, definitely from the medical staff, whose eyes widened in what David decided was alarm. David watched both quietly and patiently as Vyshtani walked over and inspected him. "Why is he awake?" the Vyshtani asked Alaris, who simply shrugged back. David raised his hand, getting both their attention, and gestured to his mouth and nose. "You shouldn't be awake," the Vyshtani said before he reached for a button by David's bed and pressed it. "Never mind, you humans don't like to follow the galaxy's rules anyway." David helpfully didn't resist as 2 medical assistants removed anything and everything that had been in him, freeing him from the life support equipment, giving him a chance to draw breath on his own, the inhale harder than needed, his exhale a bit over guttural than wanted, causing the assistants to flee. He tested his motor functions, bringing his hands up and touching fingertips together. His toes wiggled and his legs gave way at the pull of tendons. "So, Doctor, how am I doing?" David asked as he stretched and twisted his body in a futile effort to get rid of some soreness, much to the Vyshtani's chagrin. "You have been in a coma for a day," the Vyshtani said as he read off a chart. "We believed that you wouldn't wake up at all, so there is that." He stepped closer and moved the blanket covering the bandages. The stab itself didn't get too deep, however. A significant portion of the poison did reach one of your organs. Yeah, my liver, right, David said, as though he was answering a question. She was aiming for my kidney. Yes, well, by the time we identified the poison and knew of its existence, we feared it was too late, the Vishtani stated with an agitated tail swish. Why, I told someone, David's expression shifted with confusion. I said poisoned knife. Yes, we now know what you said, however, the Vishtani said, his tail swishing with more annoyance. You said it in English to a terrified Lithrani. By the time he was calm enough to speak coherently, 3 hours had passed. Oh, David said with stunned realization. So how bad is it? Your liver has sustained a lot of damage. The poison was meant to bypass it. Luckily, your different biology from its source ecosystem slowed its spread and gave us time to administer an antidote, among other things. We are still running tests at the request of your medic. She will inform you when she is ready. For now, rest. The Vishtani gazed at him. We aren't sure if you can make a full recovery, but she believes you will be fine. We should have more results by tomorrow, he said before heading for the door, leaving David and Alaris alone. David shifted a little so he could face her directly. He held her with rapt attention. Her stance wasn't her normally stoic one. It almost seemed sheepish to him. Her ears twitched as if she was waiting for something. Her face wore a shy uncertainty that he found endearing. But her eyes called at him to say something, anything, a scared uneasy raging in her gaze. Alaris, he whispered, so that hopefully only she would hear his next words. My Zandno, I am not hurt or dying. Her ears turned to face him. And I don't hold you responsible for my attack, so come here, please. He raised his hand, a happy invitation for her. His eyes signaled that he wished to hold her. An invitation she took as she walked over, her silvered brushed mane swaying, and tail whipping from side to side, her uniform restraining her wish to run, but she embraced him all the same. Her eyes looked deep into his, those wolf-like eyes of rich amber, a wish to never see him here plain behind her love. Her canine ears twitched and turned at the faintest sound, never moving more than they needed, yet showing her stronger emotions at all times. The soft paw-like hands that held feline pads, who can sense even the slightest shift in his form, claws hidden away lest she need them. Her fox-like tail now gently slapped at his arms, its fluffy impacts giving way occasionally to the few trinkets braided in. Her short fur was soft to the touch, a gleaming coat of silver, true to her station and rank, and she was his, as he is hers. I was so scared I would lose you, she said with shuddering breaths. I didn't know what to do. Her paws gently stroked his hair while she held him to her chest. It's okay, he cooed. I am sorry I made you worry, his hands carefully rubbing at her back. I was scared too. They held each other for longer than most would care for, but that mattered little to them. Slowly they parted, and David wiped a tear away from her face. Their eyes met each other, a comforting joy connecting them, the tender moment ruined as a request to enter came at the door. Come in, David called as Alaris took a quick step back, forcing them from each other. The door slid open to most of his team stepping in, only slowing their advance as they noticed Alaris's presence. Most of them had gathered except for a few. Maya and her team of scientists, Hirth and Samantha along with the pilots, and even Emmy and Jackson. Each one looked back and forth between him and Alaris. Hey guys, relax, she had nothing to do with my attack, David said as the tension began to grow. It's good you guys came, I have an announcement. They all turned their attention to him, and even Alaris lent him an ear. I am hungry, so please tell me someone has something. Like as if someone had flipped a switch, the tension vanished, replaced by the laughter of all the humans. Each of them produced a small food item for various pockets and tossed them to his bed, much to Alaris's disapproval. It's okay, my Zanno. This is how we take care of each other, he said with a reassuring wave at her. They are making sure I can recover faster, as he took a bite out of an apple that Hans provided. So the rumors are true then? Asked Samantha, drawing every human's attention. Yes, I am Alaris's Kusafane, David answered matter-of-factly. For those who need a translation, you could consider her as my wife. A few gave her a once-over while others watched him as he continued to eat. All seemed to try and understand what they had just heard. As he devoured the last of the food smuggled in, he looked at them. His care for their opinion on his personal life was still non-existent. He pushed his hands together and cleared his throat. "So I was out a day? Fill me in?" Hirth mustered himself. Everyone had finished their daily training. Also, Cole has reached his goal and then some. Samantha shook her head. "Some of the grunts want to push for your attacker to be spaced. I told them to cram it and do nothing until you were awake and out of here. All of our projects are proceeding nicely, but all but a few of the assistants we had left after the incident," Maya added. "Shuttles are fine, but the folks in the hangar are getting pokey," Oscar said. "Cole has been studying the material you had given him, and engineering hasn't seen any new issues. New lights were finally installed in the corridors." M.A. finished off. David nodded thoughtfully at their reports. "Good." He carefully stroked his chin. "Samantha, tell the grunts that they can't do anything as this isn't a Republic ship. And if I hear they tried anyway, I'll have them thrown into the brig." He shifted his gaze at Maya. "I'll have a word with all the liaison officers and see about getting your assistants back." His head tilted back a bit. "Emmy, tell Cole his evaluation is still coming, but tomorrow his lesson is in here." His hands came to a rest on his lap. "Also, somebody get Angela to come ASAP. Dismissed." They all gave him a nod and left. His body rested back into his bed. He closed his eyes, the brightness of the room pressing down on him, his mind still trying to figure out what to do next, his thoughts grinding to a halt as a soft paw rested on his head. "I am happy I chose you, even more now," Alaris said as she tenderly brushed his hair. "You know not just how to lead, but also when and how to avoid battle." David looked up at her, a warm smile coming to his expression. "I am happy you allow me in." His hand reached up and pulled her to him. "I am yours and yours alone," he said as he kisses her neck. The time seemed to slow down a bit as she held him before breaking away. Her veneer shifted as her duties finally came back, his turbulent fate no longer plaguing her mind. She stepped away from him into the foot of the bed, her eyes focused on hardened reason with each inhale she took before she spoke. "We need to solve this incident." Her voice hid all signs of her familiarity with him. "Your attacker was one of my packs. Normally, I would have simply had her thrown in the brig for a few days, but her use of a poison showed intent to kill. The regulations force me to yield to your traditions in this event." Her gaze cold as though she would accept any fate he demanded. "So, how would your kin handle this?" David furrowed his brow. If it had been a Republic ship, a tribunal would be held. But here it was a mixed crew, and not all races would support the outcome. His mind raced for an answer, but not finding any good choice, David fell back on the one he found most appealing. "Before I decide on how to handle the situation, I'd like to speak with my attacker, with you and the captain or the Duchess present." He met her gaze, their eyes attempting to read the other. "I'll arrange it." She reached for her communicator, most likely typing away his request. "May I ask why you are doing this?" Her question was firm so that he knew this wasn't something he should deflect. "My mother always said it's best to see if the problem stems from hurt feelings or misunderstanding," he said in a measured tone, knowing full well he had weaponized her culture against her, something he will pay for. "And I would always heed the counsel of my mother." Her eyes glinted with irritation at his manipulations. "Very well, I have sent the request. The attacker and Duchess will be here shortly," she said. "And thank you for allowing my request," he said, a slight cheekiness to his voice. They looked at each other. Their attention shifted slightly away from the present as their minds worked to think of a way to outmaneuver the other. Her hands clasped tightly behind her back and her stance stoic and ready, as to be expected in a matriarch of the Xanderfanes. He, however, sat straight up while his hands rested on his lap, maintaining a neutrality that only humans seemed to hold. Their showdown of cultures built tension slowly as they waited. Finally, the door opened and a human and Xandrafane guards moved into the room, escorting a Xandradane woman in, her arms and hands in manacles, followed shortly by the Duchess, who was offered a seat by David. David spoke upwards. "Gavi, please see to this interaction being recorded and archived." "Will do," the AI responded. David shifted his attention to his assailant, and a ping of recognition as he had seen her before. He returned his focus to Alaris. "Her name is Yayuli, correct?" Alaris nodded before adding, "Yayuli Hincarno, she is my third sister." David strained not to show his hesitation at that information. Yayuli, can you please tell me why you attacked me? He asked in a practice cadence as he turned to face her. Yet Yayuli remained silent as when he informed her of her failure to hit her mark, a cold malice emitting from her gaze. David thought about her attack on him, gaining a new question from his recollection. Liaison Officer Alaris, he said, still masking his reluctance to commit to a decision. What does the word Jilchash mean? His head turning to meet her eyes. Yet as he said the word, Alaris's pristine demeanor cracked at the edges, small hints of rage bubbling in her, though she quelled them with inhales through clenched teeth. In galactic standard, it would translate to a motherless demon of the afterlands. Alaris stiffened as though uttering it would summon some otherworldly abomination. It is uttered as a promise of death, not used for anything less than the act of killing for a justifiable reason. Her eyes glaring at her sister, such as when a threat to your clan is found like a predator finding its way to the nursery. David nodded, his eyes scanning the room at the reactions of others to the information. Alaris and the Zondraphane guards were similar, but the guard took a step back from Yayuli. The human grunt's already rageful glare at Yayuli moved to one of utter contempt for her. The Duchess shifted uncomfortably at the thought of killing for any reason, however, that could be chalked up to her homeworld's lack of predators. David considered everything before him. Yayuli's actions could be described as a misguided attempt to protect her clan, but her manner of attack says she didn't intend to scare him, but kill him. Yet else pushed to the forefront of his memory, his eyes narrowed at the words she spoke after he declared his protection of Alaris's honor. Liaison Officer Alaris? David kept his pace and tone deliberate. If someone on Xandra attacks a Kuzaphane from their clan and fails, what would happen to them? He asked pointedly, a desire to know what would happen among her people at such an event. Alaris's ears twitch as she thought over it. Perhaps it is not common. If they are caught, they would be forced into a fight to the death with either the matriarch or one of the daughters of the Kuzaphane. Her tone was clear and unyielding. If they survive, then they will go free. David watched Yayuli at his question and Alaris's answer, and he saw it, a ping of hope in the wrathful eyes. Perhaps she wants to return to Xandra to meet her trial there, or perhaps she has a chance of avoiding the trial altogether through a powerful friend. David turned his eyes to the Duchess, and carefully he weighed his options. Duchess, would you allow me to take to a different meaning of the regulations? He asked carefully. What has that simian mind of yours found? She asked him pointedly. While I am the human liaison officer, I am also the Kuzaphane of Alaris. Provided you agree, and Alaris allows it, I would like a trial by combat, he said in a measured tone to convey this wasn't his only idea. Not to the death, but if I beat her, she must surrender into a life sentence in custody carried out at the first community station we reach. However, if she bests me, then she will be absolved of her crime and will have won her freedom. That is an odd shift. You wish her tried under her people's rule, but the sentence be of the Republic's. The Duchess thoughtfully rubbed her beak. I will approve this as long as neither combatant is killed or severely maimed, she said before looking to Alaris. Do you agree? Alaris carefully considered the turn of events. Her Kuzaphane had bested her sister once while he was unaware. Her sister would have a chance for freedom, and she had told the Duchess she wouldn't waver. Yes, I find these terms acceptable. Alaris turned her eyes fully to her sister. Do you refuse to accept your fated trial? She asked in an authoritative growl. I do not. Yayuli spoke, eyes still glaring at David now with pure fury. Good, then how about in a week? David stated. That way we can both have time to recover and regain our strength. It must be a fair trial. The Duchess nodded along with Alaris at his suggestion, causing Yayuli and her wardens to leave, most likely back to where she was been held, followed shortly by the Duchess, who marked her departure with a wish for a speedy recovery for David. As the doors closed, the unseen weight of the whole interaction slumped onto David's shoulders, causing them to sag. His eyes drifted to Alaris, her demeanor still unchanged, her gaze demanding his focus. Alaris? He asked promptly. My Kuzaphane, she said, her eyes still hard. Don't use your nose shahs against me again, her tone stern, with clear displeasure at his decision. David knew this would come, but he had wrongly hoped it would come later. He pulled a deep breath and straightened himself, inhaling with force to clear his mind one more time. It was not a use, but an honest decision, he said, his tone matching hers, yet carrying no anger but the thoughtful desire for understanding. My Malverg may no says no keeper was a wonderful no who taught me many things, and I would not invoke her shahs needlessly. If I had used just the traditions of my people, your sister would have been imprisoned and the key lost in a black hole. His eyes softened carefully. I am your Cusifane, and I will perform all my duties, which includes giving your sister a chance for freedom. His expression shifted to one of honest concern. Alaris didn't move, her eyes carefully studying him, reading every word he spoke, scanning for any slight dishonesty. Findra David, she said as she concluded her inspection of him, her posture breaking to a weighted one. You are truly the one I want as my Cusifane, yet you find every manner to step on my tail. Her eyes softened as she came back around to his side, claiming his hand in hers. Their gaze met each other with tender care. You need to rest, my Cusifane. I'll return tomorrow. Her gentle kiss on his forehead soothed him. His visage became a warm yet sleepy smile. As you wish, my Zanno, he said with a kiss to the back of her hand. He carefully released his grip and watched her leave. He wasn't sure if he had made things better or worse. But that was a matter for tomorrow. For now, his body called to rest, the poison having drained more energy than he had recovered.